Well, after months of tension, the expulsion of an ambassador and the resettlement of so-called Afrikaner refugees in the US, President Cyril Ramaphosa and Donald Trump will finally meet face-to-face in the coming hours. Ramaphosa and a team of ministers are currently in Washington on that working visit. The South African government saying that the focus of the discussions will be on trade and, quote, global issues of interest. SABC News, as always, covering developments from Johannesburg and Washington. Shortly, we'll speak to our international editor, Sophie Mukwena. But first, let's go to SABC News correspondent Sherwin Bryce Pease, who's not too far, in fact, just outside the White House, where Donald Trump should be, Sherwin. And we're hearing of some last-minute deal-making possibly going on, and perhaps even an attempt to persuade Elon Musk ahead of the meeting tomorrow.
That's a statue of Nelson Mandela behind me, and so we're outside the South African embassy here in Washington, where the president is currently engaged with a number of his team here, the minister in the presidency, the minister of international relations and cooperation, the minister of agriculture, and then the minister, I think, that has the floor in the room a lot in those conversations is a guy by the name of Park Starr, the minister of trade, industry and competition. And you know, if you talk Tembekile about making a deal, Park Starr is where that deal is going to start and where that deal is going to end. This is very much about a forward-looking agenda in terms of the relationship with the United States, an economic and trade and investment agenda in the main. And of course, there have been some vexing peripheral issues like accusations of genocide that have been lobbed against South Africa as it pertains to white Afrikaners and the resettlement of refugees. But it's not something the South African delegation is keen to focus on. They say it's not true. They say, you know, we don't want to focus on untruths. We've told the US administration the truth. Now it's important to actually face the facts about what matters, what's real. And what's real is that based on those vexing issues, the economic relationship was under strain. And so South Africa, the presidency, Tembekile, has framed this visit as resetting the strategic relationship between Pretoria and Washington. Understand that when you call something a strategic relationship, it's not just something to throw by the wayside. It means something quite specific, that we talk to each other at all levels of government. The lines of communication have been established and opened. What has happened is they've thrown these obstacles in the way based on, you know, some of the issues we've just discussed. And what South Africa is wanting to do in this trip is to get that stuff out of the way, the Afrikaner issue, the genocide issue, which is not true, and of course get to what really matters here. South Africa's unemployment rate went up the other day. There is a stagnant, stubborn unemployment levels in South Africa. There is tepid growth in South Africa, and so getting this relationship right between South Africa's biggest economy, Africa's biggest economy, and the world's largest economy is very important to those nuts and bolts, those bread and butter issues that are facing South Africans writ large across the country today.
And Sherwin, just going into the briefing with the president, how much is the South African team willing to give away as far as what concessions they are willing to make when they meet with President Trump and his team? What sort of deals they are willing to offer? Because much of the analysis has said that they cannot go into that room tomorrow without something to offer.
Yeah, so there's a lot of speculation around that. There is some talk here that there is a possible meeting loading later tonight between Elon Musk and the delegation. That has not been confirmed on the record, but there's speculation around that and what that might look at and how that might inform the discussions tomorrow. But we'll confirm that once we have, we've positioned ourselves on firm footing in that regard. But in the context of AGOA being undermined by things like reciprocal tariffs, what we have learned from the posture of this White House is that the president is not so concerned with established free trade agreements. Think about the Canadians, the Mexicans, and the United States. There's a free trade agreement there that has been undercut by his imposition of unilateral tariffs. So Donald Trump doesn't talk much about the renewal of the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which comes up for renewal in September of this year. So the concern, I think, for many sub-Saharan countries is if AGOA goes, what then? And this is what you're seeing from the South African delegation. They might not be revealing to you what the deals might be. Yes, it might pertain to rare minerals. There are a number of rare minerals that South Africa could offer the United States in terms of the future renewable future that countries are embarking on. We're hearing about a possible deal with Elon Musk, but of course nothing is done until it's done. And so the granularity in terms of what they're discussing in the building behind me will be revealed in the days ahead. You know, a park star, for example, is very reluctant to talk to the media because he doesn't want to reveal anything until they've had those discussions at the White House. So we are in a holding pattern here. We are waiting for them to tell us and give us information, but they're very reluctant to do that because there's definitely a sensitivity here. They don't want things spilling out into the media before they've had the face-to-face with Donald Trump and his team at the White House tomorrow.
And briefly, Sherman, just lastly, so you say there's definitely a sensitivity in terms of not wanting to preempt or spoil, if you will, what's on the table from the delegation that's traveled from Pretoria. But what is their level of confidence? Are they certain that they'll come back with good news?
I mean, I guess nothing is certain until it's certain, but the posture that we are seeing, be that the spokesperson, the president himself, the various ministers, they've come prepared. They're in this, they've been talking for over 2 hours here, talking about all the permutations that might come to the fore in that meeting tomorrow. So I think prep cannot be undermined in terms of this, given the unfamiliar territory that the president and his team might be exposed to in a live television Oval Office tete-a-tete with the president. You saw Volodymyr Zelensky, you've seen many prime ministers, heads of government, Prime Minister Carney of Canada, Giorgia Meloni of Italy, Benjamin Netanyahu. They've all come here and they've all been exposed to that real TV, that live TV environment. And so, you know, I imagine that some of the briefing happening behind us is about expecting the unexpected. If it becomes a free-for-all where President Trump starts calling on various media to ask whether it be international questions pertaining to South Africa, questions of an international geopolitical nature, the South African team needs to be ready for anything because this is a very unpredictable White House and we'll only know what we know when we know it, Tebekile.
Sure, and Bryce Pease outside the South African Embassy in the United States. Let's bring in SABC News international editor Sophie Mugwena, who's watching developments from here in Johannesburg. Sophie, let's talk about the sense that we're getting in terms of America's concerns when it comes to Africa, because we know in terms of South Africa that flagged the ICJ case against Israel. They also have misgivings about South Africa's relationship with the Iranians. But today, in a briefing today, we found out where they stand, in fact, in terms of Chinese and Russian influence.
Yes, earlier on, the Secretary of State was at the Congress briefing the Foreign Policy Committee on their foreign policy and their posture globally. I have picked up that they are so much concerned about China. And you would know, at this moment, China is our largest trading partner. So I think the South African delegation must expect questions around our relationship with China. Rubio was so passionate when he was talking about that, talking about even the issue of the pharmaceutical companies, the techno hub, and also the relationship between China and Taiwan. You know that America has a particular posture, this administration, in relation to the one China policy. South Africa's foreign policy is one China policy, but the Trump administration is also talking about strengthening the relationship with Taiwan. We saw after announcing those executive orders, the Taiwanese delegation going to the United States of America, offering huge deals in terms of the development of technology. The other issue, as you pointed out, the other member of the Congress, he is quite familiar. He has been in South Africa. I spoke to him when he was in South Africa at some point in time with the delegation discussing PEPFAR. Kuhn, talking about Elon Musk and his influence. Listen to this discussion. Understand how they are aggrieved with China and watch the space on the future of Elon Musk's influence in the White House. Let's take a listen.
Now the Chinese dominate 80-something% of that industry. They could cut off our medicine. So I think when you talk about energy, I could apply that to a host of critical industries in the 21st century. If we don't address that imbalance, which is what we're hoping to do with some of the trade proposals, but also domestic matters that the administration is taking on, we're going to be in real tough shape here very soon if we're not already.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. I see my time is up, but I look forward to continuing to talk with you about how we can create this all-society strategy to be able to fight back against Communist China, because you just laid out a lot of the things that we're at risk at, and we have to have a way to be able to push back on them so that they don't decide to try to take Taiwan by force or try to do an energy quarantine, which could lead to a war which would be devastating for everybody. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. A sobering analysis of where we are on the supply chain. Senator Coons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member. Thank you, Secretary Rubio. Look forward to 2 sessions together today. This afternoon, you'll be in front of the Appropriations Subcommittee. And I think there's going to be some themes across both of these. First, I think we all agree that China poses our single greatest geopolitical threat, and that we have no choice but to deter China across the board and to outcompete China. Senator Ricketts and I just traveled to the Philippines and Taiwan and saw directly the challenges that we face there and regionally. And you've recently had some significant successes: the DRC, Rwanda, peace transition, the avoidance of escalation in India and Pakistan, the opening towards Syria. But I also frankly think that there's been a real lack of coordination and some serious harm to our standing in the world with some of the countries that we have worked most closely with over decades. The DOGE-driven, abrupt and largely illegal cancellation of billions of dollars of contracts for humanitarian relief and aid, and the disrespect and the dismissal of thousands of AID staff and our NGO partners stands in sharp contrast to the state reorganization process you just presented on in your following. You've submitted plans and proposals. We're having a conversation. You're going to send a congressional notification. We're going to have a hearing. That's the way that the reforming of USAID could have and should have happened.
You can hear the Kun talking about the issue of the United States involvement in helping poorer nations after that executive order that led to the abrupt cancellation of aid to poorer countries. You know that aid is being used for diplomacy, and therefore these issues might come up during the discussions in terms of asking South Africa the relationship with China, the relationship with Iran, including the relationship with Russia.
To what extent, though, Sophie, would it be possible for the Americans to get ahead of the growing Chinese influence, which they feel is a real thing on the African continent, without good relations with South Africa, when you consider this country's strategic role on the continent, even in times of conflict, for example?
It's too little, too late. China is now firmly filling the gap, not only on the continent, but in other areas as well. And therefore, that is why Kun is worried that the decision, the program that's being led by Elon Musk, it has led to the influence of America globally being eroded. That is why I'm saying, much as there's a talk that South Africa is going to offer Elon Musk this and that, I am standing here saying the president can't make such commitment, because you have to change the laws of the country in relation to equity. Therefore, it cannot happen tonight. But also, you can see Elon Musk in America, they are now becoming impatient because Americans are not happy. Therefore, these are the issues that the South African team must take into consideration. Yes, you can use your former homeboy to lobby, but look, his influence is waning.
Sophie Mgwena, SABC News international editor, with us as we continue to watch the developments on this working visit led by President Cyril Ramaphosa to the United States. For now, thank you.